People. I am so excited to have with me today two of my heroes, Hope Bohannick and Robert Grillo. These are the folks doing the hard work on the ground to wake up the world to the humane hoax. Our planet is being destroyed by animal agriculture. We are barreling toward a climate apocalypse. And yet, the powers that be, meat, dairy, big pharma, they won't let the real story come out. Instead, what consumers get is a humane hoax, a story about happy animals frolicking in fields. No, the vast majority of the 80 billion animals killed for food every year never touch grass. They don't see the sky except maybe on the ride to the slaughterhouse. Straight out to Hope Bohannick, the editor of this fabulous new book, The Humane Hoax. Tell us, Hope, what is the bottom line message of this book?
Well, we really wanted to define the humane hoax, and you did a wonderful job of introducing it there. And this is a collaborative effort, an anthology with many voices, 18 chapters, 18 different voices coming from many different angles. And we wanted to define the humane hoax. So, a quick definition: it's that new labeling and marketing of animal products that we're seeing now that really conveys a false sense of some kind of improvement in the industry, either ethically or environmentally. Humane washing, greenwashing, that's the humane hoax. And the greenwashing can be labels, language, websites, all those stories that they're telling consumers, trying to ease their concerns. And those concerns are real. And then there's also greenwashing. That's a part of the humane hoax. Greenwashing is the environmental aspect, where we're seeing labels like sustainable and seeing regenerative grazing and grass-fed, all these things that once again are trying to kind of ease consumer concerns about the detrimental environmental impact of animal agriculture. And the last part of the humane hoax is the backyard farming, kind of do-it-yourself ethos, where people are often, it's raising chickens for eggs, but sometimes raising animals for their flesh, for slaughtering them in small farms, backyards. The DIY egg and slaughter, egg and meat thing. And that is, I think people go in with good intentions. They don't want to be part of the big industrial system. I understand that, but I think they don't realize the complexities that are involved in caring for animals. If you're going to buy chicks at a hatchery or at the feed store, they're coming from the hatcheries, right? The industrial hatcheries. And if you're buying 6 chicks that are hens, where are the roosters? Where are their brothers? There's 6 roosters that suffered, that died, that were killed or abandoned, that their stories never told. So there's a lot of aspects to it, and we get into it in this book in numerous different chapters and from a variety of angles. And I'm just so excited to bring it to the world.
It's a must-read book. If you are already vegan and an activist, this gives you the arguments you need, especially right now as we are discussing the Farm Bill renewal, which comes up in October and will really determine how much money the U.S. government gives to support this hideously cruel, environmentally catastrophic system. Or will they start diverting the billions of dollars in subsidies to healthy fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, and legumes that humans actually eat? Now, we're not going to go into any private companies today. That's something we'll leave aside. We're talking about these issues in general. Robert Grillo, you've written one of the chapters. You are the head of Free From Harm, which is an incredible organization in Chicago that has done so much. What was the message of your chapter?
Well, it was kind of serendipitous the way these things came together. The timing of the release of the book and the release of the film that I'm critiquing in my chapter came out around the same time, within a matter of a couple of months. The film is called Sacred Cow, and everyone should see the film because it's the latest kind of Food Inc. narrative, whereby the filmmaker Diana Rogers makes a case for what she calls better meat. And so I dissect all of the different talking points that is part of the narrative of Better Meat. And I specifically look at this documentary, Sacred Cow, because it's the latest big splash from the movement. Diana Rogers, by the way, has become a major leading a meat advocate.
Let me just say this, okay? We invite Diana Rogers on anytime, and we invite anybody in the meat and dairy industry or animal agriculture industry anytime to comment. What we're talking about today is this book, and I want to focus on the book as opposed to going after any individuals in that sense. Let's talk about these philosophies because it's happening all over the world, okay? So let's discuss what the philosophical problem is that we've got to solve in order to save this planet. Robert.
So we need to speak truth to power. We need to use these incredible stories and chapters from this book and not just speak to other individuals, but we need to speak truth to power like all other social movements do, so that the people that are really calling the shots in our food industry, you mentioned the Farm Bill, we certainly have a lot of power players and lobbyists there that need to hear this message because it's really something that the whole kind of intention behind the Humane Hoax is to intercept the vegan narrative and say, hey, you don't have to go vegan. There's another ethical solution. And we need to be able to have a way to address this with people in power to make sure that our position, our argument stands true and strong. Otherwise, this humane watching and greenwashing that Hope is championing, that Hope is trying to expose, this could take over our narrative. So we need to speak truth to power.
One of the things that I've noticed lately is that with the rise of alternative proteins and the Beyond Meat burgers and the Impossible burgers, there's been a hit campaign by mainstream media, numerous articles that try to attack these foods as highly processed and unhealthy. The very same commentators never mention that the World Health Organization has declared that processed meat is officially cancer causing, unlike these other products that are plant-based. And they jump on this concept of processed. Well, if you put a mango and a banana in a Cuisinart, it's processed. That doesn't mean the mango and the banana immediately become unhealthy. That's the kind of narrative. And in my opinion, it's almost a backward compliment because it seems to be saying we're posing a threat. We in the vegan movement are now posing a threat to the powers that be and animal agriculture. So anytime they come after a particular plant-based company or the plant-based movement in general, I think that is almost a contrarian indicator, like a sign that somehow we're moving forward. What are your thoughts on that, Hope?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that this is all, the Humane Hoax really is a reaction by the industry to our success. I've been doing this work for many years. I've been actually researching about the Humane Hoax and humane washing, the humane myth, for about 20 years now, doing animal advocacy for 30 years. And back in like the 90s, the 2000s, you didn't see any of these humane labels. You would see labels like maybe fresh or young, but these new labels are because activists, vegans, people like you, Jane, and your wonderful show Issues with Jane Velez Mitchell, they brought attention to people in their living rooms that something is not right with animal farming, right, in the animal farming sector. And the clever marketers are now responding with these labels. I mean, this is a progression, really a reflection of our success. And the marketers are now trying to, appease and reassure consumers that things are improving. And so we're seeing these labels like cage-free, free range, certified humane. And I really recognize that this is probably going to continue, potentially be a problem for our movement, for our goal of ending farmed animal suffering. That these labels could possibly lull people into believing that there's a kind way to commodify animals, right? And so this really has gotten some traction and movement. We have started the Humane Hoax Project. Alistair Van Cleek of the Micro Sanctuary Movement and I started the Humane Hoax Project to get the message out there. And, I decided to start collecting these essays to really amplify this issue in the movement. And, it's got some amazing contributors. There's 18 contributing authors to this book that I edited. Such a collaborative effort. There's amazing voices, authors, activists, academics, rescuers, sanctuary workers. Along with Robert Grillo, Carol Adams wrote a chapter, Sailesh Rao, Christopher Sol Eubanks, John Sanbanmatsu, Karen Davis. So it's really a fantastic book. I would love to thank Lantern Publishing and Media for their their support and believing in the project and publishing the book. And I think it's so important. Books, I really feel books have a great deal of power because we are in this kind of TikTok culture of just short, quick social media, fast information coming and going. And a book is a way to really embody the issue, to really connect deeply with a subject and get a true feeling for a subject. So I really am so excited to bring this book to the world.
Yes, and I am very excited to read the Humane Hoax. In the intro to this video, whether it's on the streaming network Unchained TV or on any of the socials, there is a link where you can purchase this book with one click. I urge everyone to get it. All right, we've got a caller on hold. Michelle in Los Angeles, your question or thought?
Hi, thank you for having me. I think the idea of this book is well needed and amazing. I have so many friends and family members that come to me and tell me, well, we're eating humanely, and it's a healthier type of meat because they graze and they're free, and I'm just like, it's so hard to counter that because you like that they're eating plant-based occasionally, but they just don't get it. Like, what's some good advice to give them, or are there points in the book that I could bring up and tell them?
Hope?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I hear this from activists and vegans all the time that because we've got the factory farming talk down. We know what to talk about with the industrial farming and the big scale. And what happens is people will come back with, oh, but my eggs are cage free. But I get my meat at the farmer's market or whatever. And that's where we get a little tripped up, like, well, okay. And I think here that's where we need to educate ourselves, right? We have to educate ourselves about these labels, this new narrative that's being spun, this new story that's being told by the industry, that there's improvements across the board when really there's not. I mean, if you look at the industry as a whole, things are just getting worse for animals. Although you'd never know that from the stories, the labels, the websites, right? So it's definitely something that we need to educate on. And yes, this book actually has some great stories. I think stories are so important. Storytelling is so important. We can talk about statistics and facts, and there's a lot of that in the book too. Peer-reviewed research that shows that, that pasture-based farming of pigs is actually ecologically worse, things like that. So there's a lot of great studies in the book. But storytelling, I think, is so important as well. And, I actually started this book with 2 chapters that tell amazing stories about a pig named Silver in the first chapter and a little chicken named BB in the second chapter. And they are actual victims of the humane hoax, from small scale, a family pig farm was Silver was from. And so these are stories that, that can move people. And I knew it was a risk, kind of going right up front with some sad, poignant stories to put right at the beginning of the book. But, the book, it's not about labels. It's not about marketing. It's about the animals, real animals that are suffering because of these labels, because of the humane hoax. And I wanted to establish that right away. And I think that can really help people to tell their stories, to tell these animal stories, to people when they're. And the other thing I'll say about that too is when someone does say, yeah, well, I'm doing my part. I get my eggs humanely or whatever. I think we have to react positively to that and say, thank you. Thank you for caring. That's so great that you care enough to pay more for these products. Let me tell you the truth about these products. That I think that's an easy way, a good way to segue in, because they do care. I mean, that's something that we are blessed to have in our movement, is that people do care. They are compassionate. I believe that people are truly compassionate at their core, and they want to help. They want to do the right thing. And so we just have to educate them about what that is.
Yes. And, as Dr. Silas Rao, who writes a chapter of this book, says, we're all being factory farmed. It's the animals being exploited, but the people are being exploited. They're being lied to. Okay. Yeah. And you know what I say to that? You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. It's still coming out. And we've got another caller, Lindsay in Tarzana. Your question or thought?
Yes, it's interesting because you brought up TikTok, and I was on TikTok this morning on another vegan individual's page. Actually, I believe she owns a sanctuary, but she was discussing with another person who's had a so-called humane small farm, and he was telling her, oh, grow up, and this is the cows are good for the soil. And I mean, I don't know a lot. I'm learning a lot, and I definitely want to get this book, but I happen to know that the hoofcliff ruminants, in other words, the horses and all the wild animals, the wild mustangs, are the ones that develop the land, and the cattle's taking away from it. And people don't realize that. And I also liked your comment when you said to, when people do buy humane, my hairdresser did recently say, well, I buy humane meat. And I kind of snapped at her, not a lot, but a little. But I realized that was wrong. I have to praise. I love that. So thank you very much. This book is well needed. I'm going to read it immediately because I love to have information to help me be a strong activist. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lindsay raises a really good question, Robert Grillo. There is this whole greenwashing aspect of, well, the cows are helping the environment. The cows are an environmental disaster. And indeed, I want to show something that is extremely disturbing, and that is a report in Distilled. The meat and fossil fuel producers watered down the latest IPCC report, that's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. Scientists, authors recommended more plant-based diets and phasing out of fossil fuels. Those recommendations didn't make it into the final report. Here's another. The meat industry blocked the IPCC's attempt to recommend a plant-based diet. A leaked draft revealed how the meat industry is obstructing efforts to curb climate change. A last graph here. This is the greenhouse gas emissions across the supply chain list in terms of food. Beef, if you can scrutinize, it's hard to read, but I took this right off where the official site. Beef is the highest. It has the highest carbon footprint. Lamb and mutton is next. Cheese is after that. Dairy beef is after that. So there's no argument there, and yet it's suppressed from the American people. And there's a lie that, oh, cows are good for the environment. Robert.
Well, and the IPCC is on a conservative.
Oh,
they've allowed themselves to be corrupted by by special interests from the meat industry. So that says a lot right there. We should really take pause and consider the source, and is this source even legitimate anymore? Because they're basically trying to find a compromise between economic growth and reporting on climate change. And in doing so, they're not telling the public the whole truth. But I'd also like to mention something about the Humane Hoax just as a book. And, we're hearing not just, from ourselves, not from the authors, but from the industry people themselves. They're telling us that they can't avoid the conditions that we have exposed. So we, without naming any names, we have looked at some of the highest welfare producers in the country and looked at the conditions of some of the animals, and have gone to producers that we know, and they tell us they could never guarantee that they could avoid these conditions. So we're hearing it from the animal producers themselves. What more do we need to be convinced that humane washing is just a facade, and that when it really comes down to it, to expect low-paid migrant workers who are worked like machines to treat animals kindly in this frenetic process of handling animals and getting them shipped to slaughter, to think that that's ever going to look like something remotely humane is just absurd.
Well, yes, and people lie to themselves. They want to believe this because then they don't have to change. So they want to grab onto anything that says, oh, it's sustainable, it's happy, it's okay, it's free range, because then it allows them to continue their behavior. So that's another aspect of it. We've got two more callers, so we're going to race through these. These are incredible. Annie in Sherman Oaks, your question or thought?
Hello, thank you for having Jane. You guys are the most incredible. So proud of this book. It's incredible that I see more and more people, try and buy the Humane wash. But the thing is, there is a big, confusion that people don't realize, and we as people that protest, like, we know that there are companies that are selling a chicken humanely grown so much better, like 10 times better. We protest this with the Sun in LA, so we know this. So we get overwhelmed that people are harming their health, they're harming other humans to be oppressed and work in these industries. Animals are the biggest victims, and our environment. So I love that you've written this book to give us a mapping, to try and take a deep breath and try to focus on how to approach, because at times it gets really hard to speak about all the overwhelming destructions that are happening.
I agree,
so,
Annie.
Thank you for this book.
I want to thank you for calling in, Annie. And I happen to know you. You're an amazing activist. Way to go. We're going to go to the next caller here, which is Steve in Dallas. And then we've got another caller after that. Steve?
Hey, yeah, Jane, I love that graph you showed earlier of the greenhouse gas emissions impact of different foods. That data came from Joseph Poor's study out of Oxford. He does an incredible lecture on YouTube, Joseph Poor, Poore. He looked at 38,000 farms. There's a range of emissions and other environmental impacts of foods, including beef. However, the most productive method of beef he could find was still many times worse than just average plant-based proteins. So that's, people don't realize that. You hear from companies, oh, we'll just buy from us, we're taking care of it. And you're right, Jane, it's all about doubt. If you put a little bit of doubt in people's heads, they won't take action, and industries know this well. It's a total scam, and I'm glad it's being talked about. Thanks.
Here, look at this. Somebody just commented, in my 15 years working as a slaughterhouse inspector, I never once witnessed anything remotely humane. Thank you so much for calling in, Steve. Michael in Los Angeles, your question or thought?
How's it going, everybody? Great panel today. Great discussion. I just wanted to add really quickly. Hope, the reason that I found out about you is I heard you on a panel a couple years ago with climate healers. And funny enough, the caller before last, Annie, was on the panel with you with Jiva. I don't know if you remember, it was about Thanks for Living back in 2020. Anyway, that led me to buy your book, The Ultimate Betrayal, which was really a great book. And I just wanted to let you know that's how I discovered you. And I can't wait to hear your new book, when it comes out on Kindle. That's how I, read everything nowadays. But anyway, my question is, we all have dogs and cats that we love, but why is there such a big disconnect between the animals we eat on our plate and the ones we love and sleep with in our homes? I just wanted to ask both of you, Robert and Hope, that question. Thank you.
Wow, excellent question. Most Americans consider themselves animal lovers, and yet, Hope?
Yeah, I think that a part of this, possibly a big part of this, is language. And we tackle this in the book, actually. Language is such an important and critical component of animal issues. And, we categorize animals, right? Wild animals, pets, food animals. And language helps to shape this species' language, right? To put animals in these different camps for different uses. And then there's a hierarchy that happens: who we protect, who we exploit. Language really weaves this narrative. And that's part of the humane hoax, this comforting of shoppers to, oh, it's okay. These animals are humanely treated, right? Then there's a new one out, a new label that I'm seeing now: responsibly raised, right? We're seeing this now, this responsibly raised. And this one it just cracks me up. What does that mean? Responsibly raised. It could be, do they mean ethical? Do they mean environmental? It's sufficiently vague that it could really mean anything, but people will put their own meaning onto it, right? Whatever they want to believe. But the reality for the animals is essentially unchanged with these labels. We still see the separation of families, the painful body mutilations, the slaughter at a very young age. These labels are unregulated. They mean very little or nothing at all. And it's so important that we educate about that. But there's a wonderful chapter in the book by Devanatha Nair. Her chapter is called "Corrupting the Language of Animal Welfare." And here's a quote. I have it pulled up here that I want to share. It is also the crafty use of language and the stories that we tell ourselves that allow us to fawn over an animal at the zoo and still be able to consume another animal a few moments later for lunch without raising too many existential qualms. So language is a big part of it.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to take one more caller and then we're going to go to break. Emick in Los Angeles, your question or thought for our fantastic panel discussing the humane hoax.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the book and the conversation. The truth and words make a difference. And I used to believe in the humane lives, but some kind vegans and activists, they were so kind that they kindly showed me the truth, and I did not resist, even though I was an adult when I was introduced to the truth about the animal agriculture. So adults are so wrongly educated and programmed that it takes a long time to get them to see the facts. Do you find it easier to communicate with kids? And also, is your book on Audible? Thank you very much.
Oh, excellent question. That's the first thing I asked today when I saw Hope is, when are you going to put it on Audible? Because frankly, that's how I consume books today. I walk my dogs and I listen to Audible. Get it on there, Hope. Okay. What's your answer to that?
Well, right now, it is available as an ebook through the publisher, Lantern Publishing and Media. So you can get an ebook there. It will be on Kindle very soon. I'm hoping like this week. It's in the process of, I don't know what they have to do, but they're trying to get it onto Kindle. It will be there soon. And we will do an audiobook. That will come out in the fall. I'm going to be reading it, so I will do an audiobook. So all of that is happening, and you can get the ebook right now on Lantern. And as far as kids, I don't know what to say about that. I don't really do activism with children, but maybe Robert or Jane, you might have something to say
Well,
about
we actually have to take a short break here on Voice America Radio, but we're live on Unchained TV, this free streaming network. We're going to be back in a second, so stay right there.
All right, you're clear.
Thank you. And please play the music if you would. That would be great, coming in and out. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Unchained TV during this break. We are a free streaming network. You can download it for free on your phone. Just put in the words Unchained TV in your app store. You can also download Unchained TV on your television via your Amazon Fire Stick, your Apple TV device, or your Roku device. Just put in Unchained TV, one word. We're the world's only free nonprofit streaming network for animal rights and veganism, and to save animals, people, and the planet. So we also are 100% free. All the content is free. And the reason is free is the number one search term of streaming device users. So I do not take a salary. This is 100% nonprofit. For the price of a cup of coffee, you can support us. You can go to unchainedtv.com, click donate, and be part of the Unchained TV community. You'll be part of a yearly Zoom where we bring you up to date. And so please support Unchained TV, the world's only free streaming network for animal rights and the vegan lifestyle. Now we are back with The Humane Hoax. Hope Bohanec has edited this incredible book, and Robert Grillo has written the chapter, one of the chapters in it. Robert, what was your focus?
I focused on a new documentary film, but basically, I wanted to look at something concrete in popular culture, which is something I do a lot of. I look at advertising and different examples of humane washing in popular culture, and I try to shine a light on it and offer maybe a different way of interpreting it and how it's manipulating consumers and just the public in general. And I also just want to point out that, we're focusing on small producers and people that, producers that we would think of as humane, but the large corporate entities do the same thing. They use humane washing ubiquitously as well. And so we don't want to overshadow that it's coming from the big corporate giants as well. And another thing we have to really, I think, look out for is that parts of our movement can also be co-opted by the industry to make them think we have a false sense of power over their decisions by bringing us in, for example, creating an animal rights committee in their corporation and pretending to give us a voice when actually they're giving us absolutely no power. So we have to be careful about allegiance, attempts from the industry to co-opt us and make us think that they're really doing something to bring us in and give us a voice and give animals a voice when in fact they're doing nothing.
Yes, it's very Orwellian sometimes what happens, where it's really the words are the opposite of what's happening. We're coming back.
Unchained TV. To reach the show today, call in to 1-866-472-5788. That's 1-866-472-5788. You may also send an email in to jane@unchainedtv.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. I am pouring through this book myself, The Humane Hoax, edited by Hope Bohanec, who is joining us today, and the amazing Robert Grillo of Free From Harm has written one of the chapters. And this is essentially a handbook to wake you up to all the lies industry is telling you to try to keep the corporate profits coming in, even as animal agriculture is a leading, and some are arguing it's a very big subject, so it really depends on how you frame it, the leading cause of climate change. But nobody disputes that it's a leading cause. Nonetheless, the way everybody's focused on, oh, you've got to drive an electric car. Well, not everybody can afford to go out and buy a Tesla, but people can afford to eat a healthy, low carbon footprint, plant-based diet on a daily basis 3 times a day, and at the same time radically improve their health, reduce their cholesterol, reduce their chance of getting heart disease, America's leading killer, and ease animal suffering. So for climate, for compassion, for health, it's the logical way to go for all of us, because it doesn't matter how much money these companies are making. If we live in a world where you're going to pass out when you walk outside of your house because it's so hot. And I read an article last summer that delivery workers were collapsing on the street in some parts of the United States because it was so hot and they were carrying things in. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? We can make one change, one simple change. And if we remove this false assumption that we need to kill and eat animals to survive, we could radically combat climate change. We could reforest so many of the parts of the world, 40% of arable land that is used for animal agriculture. Those trees could begin to absorb carbon. We could start lowering the Earth's temperature, the temperature in the atmosphere, return it to where it was 200 years ago. We could get healthier. We could have wildlife, which we're currently decimating. We're on track to destroy all wildlife vertebrates essentially within a decade. I mean, we could reverse so many of our problems and world hunger. There are children dying right now of starvation and malnutrition around the world, while the Western world primarily, but we're exporting our bad habits to the rest of the world, are eating the most inefficient food. You could say it takes 5, 10, 15, 25, depending on the type of meat. It takes so much more food to create 1 pound of beef than it does to just feed that food directly to people who desperately need it. But scarcity creates profit. In the words of Dr. Silas Rao, we're all being factory farmed, because when you kill animals, you are hurting yourself. It might come back in the form of a tornado or a flood or a fire or heart disease, but it is gonna boomerang. And we're trying to wake the world up, but these lies stand in the way. So Hope Bohanec has gotten some of the top leaders in the animal rights vegan movement to write these chapters. And, you know, the other thing, Hope, I know you have Carol J. Adams, who is an eco-feminist, very well known. You know, she's writing. I also am perplexed how feminists, for example, who are eating animals, the ultimate patriarchy, none of these animals are making love on these factory farms. They are all forcibly impregnated. What is that? That is called rape. Let's be real. The industry term, you can Google this, is rape rack, where these animals are inseminated. I'm perplexed that feminists do not make the connection. We have environmentalists, so-called environmentalists in denial, but we also have feminists in denial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was really honored to have Carol contribute a chapter. There's another chapter too by John Sanbanmatsu, who's a professor in philosophy, where he talks about the femivore. That's what the New York Times has dubbed these women that are leaving the city, leaving corporate jobs and buying farms and actually raising, breeding, and killing animals in some kind of, humane way for empowerment. That's a fascinating chapter. But Carol's chapter as well is really amazing. She is, of course, a longtime vegan feminist, writer, activist, and her chapter is called One Bad Day. And it's really short, but it's super powerful. And we've all heard this, right? From when we're talking about a humane operation or a small scale, whatever, and the farmer will say, or someone will say, well, that animal only had one bad day, referring to the day that they are killed, right? But Carol gets really, really into this, and how there's lots of bad days that these animals endure. It was a bad day when they're castrated, when they're debeaked, when they have their babies dragged away from them, when a dear friend disappears forever, on and on. So, I love at the end of her piece too, she calls out the idea of one bad day, that a bad day is like stubbing your toe or spilling coffee in the car. It's not the frightening, brutal end of your life. I mean, that's way more than a bad day, right? So it's a really fascinating chapter, and I think everyone should. That some of these chapters, it's really wonderful because they very much stand alone. You don't have to read the book straight through. You can just kind of pick and choose these interesting chapters, and just read the one chapter that stands on its own. And this is one of those that's really emotional, and really beautiful.
And that is such a lie. I mean, one bad day. Oh my God, being born in a factory farm is a horrible experience. Then being driven in an open air truck, sometimes in extreme heat, sometimes in extreme cold, to the slaughterhouse is a horrible day. Then being slaughtered. There was just an undercover investigation about how gas chambers for pigs are unbelievably cruel. You can't even look at the footage. You look at 5 seconds of it. I have it here. I could play it for you. I could ruin your day. I'm not going to do that. Take my word for it. It's a really, really horrific. And when those doors close, the worst part is you see those beautiful baby pigs go in there and the trucks come out empty. And oh my God. What's really interesting, I've gone to many vigils, which are where you bear witness to these animals going in to die. Give them a little water if you can, give them a moment of love. And people don't want to go. I've tried to bring many people who are meat eaters, and they say, well, I think I'll get sick. But yet you can eat that pastrami sandwich, or you can eat that bacon and eggs, and yet you can't go and witness what you are essentially underwriting. That is, to me, moral cowardice. And that's what we're engaging in. We're engaging in willful denial. See no evil, hear no evil. I don't want to know. So we're in a bit of a conundrum, Robert Grillo, where people say, oh, look, I eat humane meat. Don't leave me out of it. It's fine. But I don't want to see any evidence to the contrary. Okay. I don't want you to tell me that maybe I'm wrong. Okay. And then don't show me any evidence. I will not go see it. But nonetheless, I'm going to continue my behavior.
That's right. I mean, the way to change the paradigm, I think, is to, let's use this great material from this book and let's get it into the dialogue about our food system by not just talking to our neighbors and friends and people that we meet that claim they make humane choices and all that, but really trying to get the message to the power holders, the people that really make decisions about our food system. We've talked investors and billionaires out of investing in the slaughterhouse industry and instead investing in something more humane and sustainable, something plant-based. They've got a lot of money, and it's just a matter of where they're going to put that money. And we need to be there to intercept the dialogue and say, hey, don't invest in the animal industries. Don't buy the humane myth. We need to get those messages into the minds of these big players if we really want to see the kind of transformative change in our food system.
I mean, sometimes I just wonder about the intelligence of the so-called best and the brightest, which, by the way, was a sarcastic title. The whole point of the book is that the best and the brightest brought us the Vietnam War, the quagmire there. And so that was the whole point of the book, actually. Like, if you listen to the best and the brightest, watch out. And that's the situation we're in. I was listening, and yes, everybody's saying get that audiobook out, because that's how a lot of people are. I think even you could argue most people are just listening to books now. But I was listening to this book about history, and it said, the professor said, Easter Island is an isolated island, and there was a very thriving community there, that thousands of years ago, or a couple of thousand years ago, but it's very isolated, and they were chopping down the trees. And he said they had to know on some level, when they chopped down the last tree, they would no longer be able to build boats, and they were basically signing their own death warrant. And the professor said, nevertheless, they chopped down that last tree, and they did sign their own death warrant, and the civilization collapsed. And I was listening to that, and I was like, that is exactly what's happening today. We are not doing this, Hope, because we get a commission for every vegan meal that's consumed. We have no profit motive ourselves. We're basically just saying, people, the world is on a trajectory of ecological collapse. This is in your self-interest to switch to a plant-based diet. And it kind of blows my mind that people are engaged in such self-destructive behavior. Ultimately, eating meat is self-destructive, just like shooting up heroin or drinking alcoholically or doing drugs of any sort. Hope.
Yeah, I would agree, absolutely. And on the note of that, we're not getting paid for every vegan meal. All the proceeds for my book is going to go to my nonprofit, Compassionate Living. So yeah, we're hoping as activists to be put out of business, right?
Yes,
we don't want to do this work. We would rather be doing something else. But of course, this is so important. It's dire and absolutely critical, as you were saying. I think that this issue is so important to focus on and to educate on, because it's really, I think, our 21st century challenge, right? That there's this seemingly cruelty-free or kind way to buy meat, dairy, and eggs, right? It didn't used to be that way. Back in the 90s, early 2000s, if you didn't want to engage in animal cruelty, you went vegan. That was the only choice. But that now the narrative has changed, right? And now there's supposedly this kind way to commodify animals. So it's very, very important to really to focus on this, because this industry, they are trying desperately to hold on to their cruel, unsustainable, outdated way of doing things by really telling soothing stories of improved conditions. But as the book reveals, and as we know, there is no humane way to commodify animals. There never can be. And there's an interesting point about getting the animals out onto pasture, right? There's this kind of romanticized notion of, if we can just get the animals out onto pasture, out of the confinement buildings, then everything will be all right environmentally and ethically. But that's really not the case. These are not wild animals. These are domesticated animals. There's numerous studies that underscore the myriad of problems of free-ranging animals, putting animals out to pasture, on the pasture, both environmentally and ethically. And environmentally, what is it that has pretty much destroyed the land across this country, across the world? Grazing animals, clearing, deforesting areas, clearing areas to graze animals. And what are they proposing as the solution? Grazing more animals, getting them out of the confinement barns, putting them out to pasture for regenerative grazing and for carbon neutral beef. And it's so frustrating and makes no sense, right? And there was these fantastic studies. There's a meta-analysis actually that is revealed in the first chapter of the book that shows it looked at organic and free-range pork operations, and it found that pigs. It was a 20-year study, and it found that pigs in free range and pasture raised situations, they were exposed to extreme temperatures, heat stress, not being able to get adequate shade. The lighter colored skin, the little pink pigs, were getting sunburns and blisters. And then in the extreme cold, they were getting frostbite, piglets dying of hypothermia and pneumonia. They're more vulnerable to predators. There's issues with monitoring them to treat sick animals. So many issues. And it's in the first chapter of the book, Ingrid Taylor's chapter. She's a writer for Sentient Media, and she does an amazing job exposing the pork industry. She actually had a lived experience growing up on a small scale pig farm. So when people accuse us of, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you've never been on a farm. Well, there are those voices, these vegan voices that have, had that experience. She grew up on a small scale pig farm that was her family's farm, and she can she can tell us the stories of these pigs and what they experienced. So, it's it's a critical issue, and I think that the Humane Hoax really is now going forward, where we have to shift our language, our focus, so that we don't let people get complacent with these labels.
Well, somebody said, first of all, you can do an Audible on Spotify, so something you should check out. You may want to check out. And, the other thing is, somebody said this should be in every school and every library. I think this book should be sent to every member of the media, because they perpetrate the Humane Hoax. I mean, even during the height of COVID, when slaughterhouses were hotbeds of the COVID virus and slaughterhouse workers were dying at a higher rate, the networks never used the word slaughterhouse. They said food processing facilities. They're afraid of even using the word slaughterhouse. And the media is a big part of the problem. I know this. I was in mainstream media for 38 years. And you don't have to have somebody knock on your door and say, hey, don't talk about this. You just look at the commercials, and the message is very loud and clear. Fast food, pharmaceuticals, that's what keeps the lights on. So they do not talk about this. And that's a big part of the problem. Then you have the government that is totally co-opted by the meat and dairy industry. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is run by a dairy industry trade group leader. And we're barreling toward the Farm Bill being renewed in October. And I know there are organizations that are in there trying to convince these
regenerative grazing is all over that. So much money being allocated possibly to regenerative grazing. It's very scary.
It's terrifying, but I always take a cue from Dr. Silas Rao. He says Mother Nature is more powerful than all of us put together. At a certain point, Robert, I know you're in Chicago. You experienced the bitter cold. We have the crazy weather over here with the massive floods and then the drought here in California. Wherever you are, we are seeing with our own eyes the impact of climate change. Is there going to come a point where, despite all of this denial, we hit bottom on animal agriculture and meat?
Well, sure. Yeah. And, to what extent are we going to, self-destruct before we reach that point? And that's why I think the lesson with the Farm Bill, since you've mentioned that a few times, is that when we play by the system's rules all the time, we lose, because those rules are set up for us to fail, because we're on the outside. And if we want to change that system and rebuild it because it's too corrupted by special interests, then it has to be a grassroots, people-led movement that creates that and demands the change from the top. So the system as it stands doesn't allow us in. Maybe we'll get a three-minute comment in, and they'll say, thank you very much, and they're not required to respond, right, to our comments. So the system is set up to give us a very limited voice, the people that really have the most at stake from the impacts of animal agriculture, the people that are really on the front lines of the damage, the deaths that are happening because of climate change, and they have the least voice. So in order for that to change, we kind of have to dismantle the current system and create something new. We need new leadership. We have to demand new leadership. So that's kind of part of what, the activism that I'm involved in.
Well, I mean, here's something I saw the other day. The USDA announces more than $43 million investment in meat and poultry processing research, expansion, and innovation. So they're going in the wrong direction. And, are we going to be the next Easter Island? That's my question. Do we want to be the next Easter Island? It has to be a grassroots movement. We have to rise up. And the way we do that is to reach the 8 billion people out there. And this is why I started Unchained TV, because a lot of times we're in a vegan echo chamber talking to each other. Get this book, The Humane Hoax. It is fantastic. I'm going to read it to get all the arguments I need so I can speak truth to power. And I just want to thank Hope for joining us and Robert for joining us and for all the incredible work you do. Absolutely amazing. Carry on. See you next time here on Unchained TV.
Thank you, Jane.